The 42nd floor conference room lay bathed in the glow of dusk, the last rays of sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows in gentle orange shafts that softened, but also underscored the room's solitude. In this luxurious space, Claire Hamilton, the most powerful woman at the Hamilton Corporation, sat silently before a marble table, her eyes fixed on the exquisitely carved chess pieces arranged on the board before her. At 35, Claire was a young CEO, renowned not only for her striking presence, but for a razor-sharp intellect and an uncanny gift for ruthless strategy. Over the past decade, she had transformed her family's modest firm into a sprawling multinational empire, dominating the financial markets with daring and often merciless tactics. Yet all the glory came at a price, a crushing loneliness that she wore like armor. She had never truly known love or genuine connection. In her world, affection was a luxury she could never afford, and perhaps one she would never possess. In the hush, the conference room door clicked quietly, then swung open. A tall black man in simple gray janitor's coveralls stepped inside, pushing his cart with such careful, hushed efficiency that it was as if he were invisible to the titans operating the world above. This was Elijah Brooks, 39, quietly diligent, and 2 years into his unassuming role here. Elijah went about his customary tasks with the utmost respectfulness, but today something on Claire's chessboard arrested his attention. He paused, calm yet intense, and studied the pieces as though they held a secret. Claire caught the glance and felt an unexpected tremor, an urge to shatter the oppressive stillness. Raising a perfectly arched brow, she surveyed the man before her with a hint of haughty amusement. Then, in a tone equal parts bravado and mockery, she issued a reckless challenge. "If you beat me at chess, I'll marry you." Her voice rang out across the cavernous room, equal parts arrogance and jest. She was certain he lacked both the nerve and the skill to accept, and that, in a moment, she'd shrug it off and reclaim her indomitable composure. But Elijah did not laugh. He did not waver. Instead, he straightened to his full height, meeting Claire's gaze with an almost uncanny serenity. His eyes, steady, self-possessed, spoke of resilience forged through life's storms, impervious to idle provocation. "I play for real," he said simply, his deep voice calm but unwavering. Claire's smile faltered. Curiosity mingled with irritation. How dare this janitor accept her challenge so earnestly? She had intended merely to stir the air, then dismiss him with a witty retort. Now, faced with his confidence, she found herself compelled to see him anew. She studied him a few beats longer, noting the quiet dignity in his posture. Nothing like the men she usually knew, impressed by title and wealth. He stood, not as a supplicant but as an equal, perhaps even an adversary. Her heart betrayed her usual aloofness, stirring with something she hadn't felt in ages. Intrigue, maybe a spark of excitement. Gently sliding her chair back, she beckoned him, voice softer now. "Then, have a seat. I'm genuinely curious how good you are." Without hesitation, Elijah approached the table, drew out the chair, and sat across from her. Every movement was composed, betraying none of the assumed deference of a custodian, rather the poise of a seasoned chess master. He leaned forward, eyes tracing the board, and spoke in measured tones. "You favor the Queen's Gambit opening, classical variation. You like to control the center rather than gamble on obscure tactics." Claire froze, astonished at his precision. He wasn't asking a question, he was stating a fact. Beneath her chestnut hair she felt a thrill. Was it surprise, a hint of admiration, or the unsettling doubt that maybe she'd misjudged him? "You know your chess," she admitted. her tone losing some of its edge. Elijah offered a slight, confident smile. "Are you sure you want to continue?" "I don't often lose." "We're alike, then," Claire replied, lifting her white pawn, her eyes locking on Elijah's for a moment longer. "Let's begin." Silence reclaimed the room as they plunged into the game. But Claire sensed that this encounter, this simple match of wits, might upend everything she thought she knew about herself, about love, and about the values she'd long sidelined. And she had no idea what would come next. The white pawn had barely touched the cold marble board when the soft click sounded, like a wake-up call snapping Claire out of her familiar power-driven reverie. In that fleeting moment, her gaze drifted to Elijah's hands, large and strong, yet astonishingly precise in their movements. Those hands seemed completely at odds with the faded janitor's uniform he wore, a uniform that spoke of a humble, anonymous life marked by hidden hardships. Claire quickly tore her eyes away and forced her attention back to the board. Deep in her heart, long encased in ice, a tiny ember of curiosity flickered to life. How could this man, with his rough, working-class appearance, be hiding depths Claire could scarcely fathom? The truth was, Claire Hamilton had never been surprised. From childhood, she'd been taught that failure was unacceptable. Raised in New York's most powerful family, she'd inherited not only a vast financial empire but also the crushing expectation to outshine her own father, a harsh man whose standards were as lofty as the skyscrapers they inhabited. She'd built her reputation on billion-dollar deals, earning Wall Street's respect and fear in equal measure. Yet behind that admiration and dread, no one truly loved her. Claire was so cold, so formidable, so proud, that no one dared breach the tangled, chaotic world hiding behind her flawless CEO facade. Her success had been forged in thousands of sleepless nights, high-stakes negotiations, and relationships that dissolved in bitterness. Love, to Claire, was an unwinnable battle. She'd loved before, but every romance ended in heartache. Men who courted her were either opportunists hoping to exploit her power or crushed under the weight of her indomitable will. Now, in this opulent, icy 42nd floor conference room, Claire faced a stranger who unsettled her like nothing before. A black janitor who, for the first time in her life, made her feel she might not entirely be in control. She glanced at Elijah and wondered, was there something worth her attention hidden within this man, or was this challenge nothing more than a spontaneous diversion? On the other side of the board, Elijah Brooks showed no hint of emotion. He moved the first piece with the calm precision of an international grandmaster. Yet no one in this lavish room knew that beneath his composed exterior lay an ocean of pain, silent sacrifices, and a boundless love that defied measure. Not long ago, Elijah had stood at the pinnacle of the chess world. At 16, he was America's prodigy, hailed by the press as the next Bobby Fischer, destined to bring new glory to national chess. But life rarely follows a straight path. When his beloved wife, Lisa Brooks, succumbed to a vicious cancer, Elijah's world collapsed. He walked away from everything, fame, international tournaments, the hefty prize money, to become a single father fighting to preserve the fragile breath of his only child. Mia Brooks, his 8-year-old daughter, bright-eyed with hope, struggled daily against a relentless asthma that turned each sunrise into a battle for survival. Father and daughter lived in a modest apartment on the city's edge, their days defined by simplicity and hardship. Elijah took the janitor's job at Hamilton Corporation because it offered the only stable employment with health insurance, vital for Mia's care. Each evening, after exhausting work hours, he returned home to cook simple meals, listen to Mia's school stories, and sit by her bedside for hours to make sure she slept soundly through the night. That little home, though lacking in material comforts, overflowed with love and warmth. Time-worn walls displayed Mia's crayon drawings, faded photographs of Lisa, and the medals and certificates Elijah had earned in his chess heyday. Every morning he awoke to those reminders. He had once possessed it all, and he would willingly give up everything again to safeguard the life of his precious daughter. Playing chess with Claire wasn't just a battle of wits. It was Elijah's unspoken declaration of his true self, a testament to the worth of someone cast aside by society. Though dressed in a simple uniform, he refused to be pitied or underestimated. He took pride in who he was, and the sacrifices he'd made for Mia were his greatest triumph, surpassing every title or trophy life could offer. Claire began to understand that this match was more than an intellectual challenge. It was a collision of two worlds. On one side stood Claire's power, wealth, and solitary chill. On the other, Elijah's poverty, simplicity, and overflowing love. And Claire had yet to grasp that this game would soon upend both their lives, bringing emotions, conflicts, and choices far beyond anything they could predict. The antique clock in the corner struck soft chimes, announcing that night was falling outside the broad windows of the 42nd floor. In the stifling silence of the room, Claire Hamilton watched Elijah's every move on the chessboard, her heart beginning to beat faster than usual. A strange mixture of curiosity and unease crept into this powerful woman's mind as she realized their game was no longer merely a pastime to kill time. Elijah's calm was almost unbelievable. Every piece he placed carried precision and confidence that left Claire startled. His gaze never left the board. He was wholly absorbed in each move as if this were the most important match of his life. With every move Elijah made, Claire felt an invisible pressure mounting in the room. Claire had always trusted her own abilities. From childhood, her father had drilled into her the unacceptability of failure. Their chess matches ended in tears and bitterness, but that crucible had forged Claire into a relentless warrior, a CEO who never surrendered. Yet now, facing Elijah, a humble janitor, she sensed something far beyond her control. At first, Claire took the initiative, speeding up the game with fierce attacking moves, but Elijah never wavered. He met each of her assaults with calm, steady replies, as if he had anticipated every tactic she might employ. By the 10th move, Claire realized this was no simple contest. Rather than flounder or falter, Elijah only grew more masterful, gently guiding Claire into the tactical trap he'd set long ago. Cold sweat beaded on Claire's brow, an experience she'd never had in any boardroom meeting or billion-dollar negotiation. The man before her was no longer a mere laborer, but a true grandmaster of strategy and psychology. Suddenly, she recalled his confident words at the outset. "I don't lose often." Claire narrowed her eyes at Elijah, torn between irritation and challenge. Her mind raced. Who was this man? How could an ordinary janitor conceal such extraordinary talent? Was he toying with her? That mingling of doubt and intrigue spurred her to marshal every ounce of her intellect to defeat him. Yet, just a few moves later, the tide turned completely. Elijah executed unexpected plays, each move as precise as a surgeon's scalpel, cutting off Claire's escape routes. She scrambled to respond, but every counter only deepened her entrapment in his sophisticated snare. By the 20th move, Claire found herself cornered. Her white queen was frozen in place, and every other piece faced heavy loss if moved. She tried to calculate every possible variation, but all led to a clear defeat. Shame, anger, and helplessness welled up within her as she confronted this harsh reality. Elijah gently placed his knight on the board and looked Claire in the eye with respect and sincerity, then spoke softly but decisively. Checkmate. 2 simple words, yet more devastating than 100 criticisms Claire had ever endured. She sat motionless, staring at the board where her king lay besieged. Heavy silence enveloped the luxurious room as waves of emotion crashed through her. Claire had lost after only 21 moves, unthinkable for someone as proud as she. An unnameable humiliation washed over her, but alongside it, a genuine admiration. Astonishment at the man who had beaten her so convincingly and fairly. She lifted her head, studying Elijah as though seeing him for the first time, wondering whether he was truly just a janitor or something far more. Shame and curiosity warred within her. Elijah rose slowly, calmly resetting the pieces as if their match were only a small moment in his life. When he finished, he met Claire's tumultuous gaze and said in his steady, gentle voice, "Thank you for the game. It's been a long time since I felt so fully myself." Then he quietly wheeled his cart out of the room, leaving Claire alone with countless unanswered questions. Alone on the lofty 42nd floor, Claire Hamilton, for the first time, acutely felt her own weakness and smallness. Beyond her glittering power lay realities she could not control, especially when they sprang from someone like Elijah Brooks. Her heart pounded, signaling that this defeat was not merely a lost game, but the beginning of a long journey filled with unexpected trials and revelations she could never have imagined. The conference room door clicked softly behind Elijah, an echo that lingered in Claire Hamilton's mind like a haunting reminder. She remained motionless before the chessboard, her eyes fixed on the white king lying inert on the marble surface, a stark emblem of the defeat she'd never imagined facing. Her thoughts swirled with unanswered questions, but one fact stood out. Elijah Brooks was nothing like she'd assumed. Claire was accustomed to controlling everything. In business, she was decisive, always 3 steps ahead of her rivals, inspiring respect and fear the moment her name was mentioned. Yet now she felt like a lone pawn, crushed by an unseen force. The name Elijah reverberated in her mind, compelling her to uncover more about the stranger who had upended her arrogant, orderly world. A few days later, in her private office on the building's top floor, Claire sat before her laptop, the cool blue glow reflecting off her focused expression. Driven by curiosity, she bypassed usual protocol to pull Elijah Brooks's personnel file, an action she'd normally consider unthinkable. At first, only the basics appeared. Age 39, widower, 1 young daughter named Mia, employed as a janitor at standard pay. No criminal history, no unusual notes, just the life of a quiet, unremarkable employee. But then she spotted a hidden line under previous occupation. International chess master. FID rating, 2437. Claire froze, eyes wide. An international chess master, how could that be? Her pulse quickened as she darted to the U.S. Chess Federation database. Within moments, a vivid past emerged, one Elijah had once dominated. Old articles praised him as a rare prodigy, America's next Bobby Fischer, destined to bring new glory to the nation's chess community. Faded photographs showed a 16-year-old Elijah, bright-eyed and confident, accepting top awards from world-renowned grandmasters. Claire read on, feeling the genuine admiration that had once surrounded him. Then she noticed a sudden halt in his record 8 years ago, a puzzling gap. Digging deeper, she found the reason: tragedy, not failure. His wife, Lisa Brooks, had been diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. A local news story recounted how Elijah withdrew from an international tournament, just before the finals, to return home and care for her. He sacrificed his burgeoning career at its peak, a decision the press had labeled both heartbreaking and inexplicable. Claire recognized it for what it was, a monumental act of love transcending any personal ambition. Lisa passed away a year later, leaving Elijah alone with baby Mia. Around that same time, Mia's severe asthma surfaced, turning each day into a fight for survival. With no other options, Elijah traded his Grandmaster title for a janitor's uniform, securing the steady paycheck and health insurance that kept his daughter alive. On her screen, Claire stared at a recent photo of Elijah and Mia, two simple figures in plain clothes, their smiles radiant with love and hope. For the first time, she felt a genuine admiration laced with confusion, and something she'd never expected, her heart fluttering for a man she'd barely noticed before. Her pulse quickened as she pondered how many important things she'd missed, perched high on her pedestal. How many people like Elijah had passed through her life, overlooked because of her prejudices about status and success? That night, Claire lay awake, her mind awash with images of Elijah and Mia's modest, love-filled life. She pictured their small apartment, the tireless hours Elijah spent caring for his daughter, and the warm resilience in his smile, despite every hardship. Claire realized she stood at a crossroads, a complete shift in how she viewed the world. She wondered if this chance meeting with Elijah was fate's way of jolting her awake from the cold, unfeeling person she'd become. Deep in her heart, she knew she would never be the same. From this moment forward, she would have to confront her own emotions, messy, unpredictable, and very real, the ones Elijah had unknowingly stirred within her. And she had no idea how extraordinary the journey ahead would be, or how profoundly it would change both their lives. The lingering thoughts of Elijah still hadn't faded from Claire's mind, as if fate were quietly sending her a clear signal she couldn't ignore. That morning, just as the sun peeked over the high-rises, Claire stepped out of the elevator in the Hamilton building and headed toward the familiar VIP parking lot. But this time, her focus wasn't on her overflowing inbox or her packed schedule. It was instinctively searching for the figure of the man who'd been running through her thoughts all week. Suddenly, a strange sound cut through the early morning quiet, a desperate, piercing scream echoing from the employee section at the far end of the lot. Claire's instincts told her something terrible was happening. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward the noise, her heart pounding. When she arrived, the scene froze her in place. Elijah was kneeling on the cold concrete, cradling Mia, his little girl with terrified eyes and bluish lips, struggling for every small, frantic breath. Mia was having a severe asthma attack. Her breathing was so frail it felt like it could stop at any moment. "Sweetheart, stay calm. Daddy's here, Mia. Daddy's right here," Elijah whispered, his voice trembling even as he fought to stay composed. He fumbled for her inhaler, but it was obvious it wasn't working. His eyes were filled with despair and helplessness, the deepest fear of any father who might lose his only child. In that instant, Claire rushed to their side, abandoning every social barrier and power dynamic she normally upheld. She knelt beside Elijah, her voice firm but full of concern. "Elijah, let me help." Elijah looked up at her, momentarily stunned to see the haughty CEO he'd bested just days before. But in that moment, pride and status meant nothing. He simply nodded in desperation, silently pleading for her help. Without hesitation, Claire pulled out her phone and called building security and medical services in a single breath. "This is Claire Hamilton. Dispatch an ambulance to the Hamilton Building's underground parking lot immediately. I expect it there within 5 minutes. Do you copy?" "Yes, Miss Hamilton," came the hurried, respectful reply, and notify St. Mary's Hospital Emergency Department that a pediatric asthma emergency is inbound. I will personally guarantee all costs and handle the paperwork. No delays." Claire hung up and turned back to Elijah, truly seeing for the first time the anguish etched on the face of the man who had so stirred her heart. A wave of sorrow washed over her. This was the first moment she truly grasped the limits of her power in the face of a loved one's suffering. Something neither money nor influence could instantly fix. In under 5 minutes, the wail of an ambulance siren shattered the tense silence. Paramedics swarmed around Mia, fitting her with an oxygen mask, administering emergency medication, and then carefully loading her into the stretcher. Elijah hurried alongside, his eyes never leaving his daughter as he gripped her tiny hand. Claire watched them go, a strange swirl of emotions in her chest. She had never so starkly seen the boundary of her own power. Determined to oversee everything herself, she followed the ambulance in her car to the hospital. At the hospital, Claire leveraged every ounce of her reputation and authority to ensure Mia received immediate treatment, cutting through red tape. Elijah stood at her side, his eyes still rimmed with tears, but no longer hopeless. Instead, they held a deep, heartfelt gratitude. He looked at Claire with a new warmth, as though, for the first time, he truly saw the person behind her icy, powerful exterior. An hour later, the doctor called with the best possible news. Mia was stable. She lay sleeping peacefully in the ICU, her breathing steady and smooth. Elijah nearly collapsed with relief, tears slipping down his cheeks. "Claire, I don't even know how to thank you," he choked out, addressing her by name with an intimacy she'd never before heard from him. Claire paused for a moment, then offered a genuine, gentle smile. "There's no need to thank me. You're an incredible father, Elijah. Mia is so lucky to have you. Besides, I just did what anyone would in this situation." Elijah looked deep into Claire's eyes, surprise and emotion flooding him. He realized that behind her aloof, proud facade was a compassionate woman, a person far different from the image he'd held of her. That afternoon, in the quiet corridors of the hospital, an invisible yet unbreakable bond began to form between Claire and Elijah. The harrowing event hadn't just saved Mia's life. It had opened an entirely new chapter for them both. A chapter of understanding, respect, and perhaps something deeper that neither had expected. The last rays of daylight slipped through the narrow hospital room window, softly illuminating Mia's sleeping face and making the space feel gentler and warmer than ever. Claire stands silently by the window, her thoughtful gaze drifting over the city below. She wonders when her life became so naturally entwined with these two strangers, something she never would have imagined and would have laughed off as impossible just days ago. At the other side of the bed, Elijah gently clasps Mia's tiny hand, his eyes full of love and gratitude. Claire catches sight of the tender scene and feels her heart flutter unexpectedly. A strange yet comforting sensation stirs within her, something she had nearly forgotten over the years. After that day, Claire looks for ways to approach Elijah more naturally. Their early meetings feel accidental, brief encounters as she passes through his work area, or casual visits to the staff cafeteria under the pretense of asking about Maya. Gradually, Claire's presence beside Elijah becomes familiar. Their conversations lengthen and deepen, so genuine that they both seem to forget the vast gulf between a powerful CEO and a humble janitor. With every exchange, Elijah listens attentively, understanding the pressures and loneliness hidden behind Claire's formidable exterior. In turn, Claire learns more about the unimaginable pain and sacrifices Elijah has borne for Mia, deepening her respect and admiration for him. A special bond takes root between them, unspoken but intense. Claire realizes she looks forward to these meetings, to the warmth of Elijah's calm, gentle smile, and the loving patience with which he cares for Mia. Unbeknownst to Claire, someone has been secretly watching and recording their growing closeness ever since that first chess match, a junior employee named Jason Miller. Jason, ambitious but resentful of his modest position, sees Claire's interest in Elijah as a golden opportunity to grab the attention of senior leadership and advance his own standing. One fateful morning, Claire steps into her office, only to sense the strange looks from her staff and hear whispered chatter. She frowns, checks her phone, and freezes. A video of her chess match with Elijah has been posted to the company's internal network. CEO Claire Hamilton loses bet to Janitor. Engaged over a fateful chess match? Jason had secretly filmed them through the conference room window. The footage is ruthlessly clear, exposing every expression and arrogant quip Claire made, now the subject of gossip and ridicule throughout the company. In an instant, the respect she had painstakingly earned is shaken. She becomes the butt of jokes and scorn. The scandal quickly spills into social media, where reporters pounce and public outrage erupts. Major news outlets run sensational headlines attacking her reputation with phrases like abuse of power, loss of dignity, and irresponsible CEO. Her phone rings nonstop. Board members calling, furious texts from her father, Richard Hamilton, the strict, cold man who raised her. What were you thinking, Claire? A CEO of your stature betting marriage on a janitor? You've dishonored the Hamilton name. Claire feels the world turning its back on her. Pressure from her family, the board, and public opinion corners her like never before. The walls she built around herself crumble, and all her achievements seem worthless against the force of this backlash. Elijah, too, becomes a target, mocked and scorned for his status as a black janitor. He meets disdainful looks every time he enters the building, an indignity he'd long hoped to shield Mia from. Their budding relationship now teeters precariously. Claire worries Elijah will think she used him for amusement or self-gratification, while Elijah feels guilty for dragging Claire into her public shame. Both know their feelings face their toughest trial yet. Claire, the powerful but lonely woman, experiences isolation and hurt in ways she never has before. And Elijah, the humble father who sacrificed everything for love, finds himself thrust into a battle he never wanted, fighting societal prejudice and judgment. Amid this storm of scandal, neither Claire nor Elijah realizes the hardest challenges still lie ahead, or how profoundly their lives will be changed. The scandal storm only grew, casting a dark shadow over every corner of Claire and Elijah's lives. After days of silently bearing the pressure, Claire finally snapped. One bitterly cold afternoon, with winter winds howling through her high-rise office windows, she sat drained and sleepless, staring blankly at her laptop screen filled with vicious comments from the media and social networks. Rage and frustration boiled up inside her, desperate for release. Just then, Elijah knocked gently and entered, his eyes full of worry and regret. He hadn't come to reproach her, but to seek a sliver of understanding, some small reassurance amid the chaos. "Claire," he began hesitantly, his voice low, "I just want you to know how sorry I am for everything that's happened." But his apology was the final straw. Claire whipped around, the warmth gone from her eyes, and replaced by a chill that cut deeper than any blade. "You're sorry?" she sneered, voice sharp as shattered glass. "Or are you just enjoying your sudden fame throughout the company? I never thought you'd be that kind of person, Elijah." Her words struck Elijah like a blow to the chest. He stood frozen, shock and pain widening his eyes. Her accusation pierced a wound he'd long hidden beneath his calm, resilient exterior. The wound of a man who had already suffered too much loss. "Do you really think I did all this just for attention?" Elijah's voice trembled with a mix of anger and hurt. "I never wanted any of this. I never wanted my daughter to become the center of someone's gossip. Do you honestly think I'd sacrifice my dignity and Mia's peace for a few judgmental glances and cruel whispers?" "Oh, please," Claire shot back, dripping with scorn. "You're just like everyone else, using other people's pity to get what you want. I was a fool to think you were different." The words stung Claire the instant they left her lips, but her pride and pain held them fast. She stood rigid, looking Elijah squarely in the eye, fighting the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her. Elijah fell silent, his gaze heavy with disappointment and heartbreak. Her bitter words revealed more than her anger. They laid bare a racial prejudice he'd hoped she'd left behind. In that moment he understood the painful truth. To Claire and her world of privilege, he would always be no more than a lowly black janitor, unworthy of real connection. "I once believed you were different, Claire," Elijah said at last, straining for composure. His voice cracked, but he pressed on. "I never asked anything from you, only for peace for my daughter. But now I see I was the one who was wrong. You'll never look at me any other way, will you?" Claire could not answer. Deep down, she knew she had inflicted a wound impossible to heal. Elijah shook his head slowly, resolve hardening in his eyes even as they filled with sorrow. "I won't trouble your life any more," he said quietly. "Don't worry. From today on, Mia and I will stay out of your world." He turned toward the door, each step weighted with the hopes and faith he once held. Before he walked away, he paused and looked back at Claire, his voice soft but piercing her heart. "I truly hope, Claire, that one day you'll understand. Not everyone acts out of self-interest. Some of us, no matter how poor or insignificant you may think we are, still have our pride and true love for those we care about." The door closed behind him with a final thud, echoing like a judgment in Claire's ears. She stood frozen in the empty office, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. For the first time in her life, she realized what she'd lost. A genuine bond, a depth of feeling that no amount of money or power could ever buy. And Claire understood, too, that from this moment on she would live forever haunted by regret and guilt for the one thing she had destroyed, the one thing that mattered more than anything she'd ever owned. The sound of the door closing seemed to ring on in Claire's mind like a cold, yet just verdict from fate. She stood motionless in her opulent office, suddenly alien and eerily empty. Elijah had walked out of her life, taking with him the fragile trust and hope for the simple happiness she'd accidentally discovered. Claire moved slowly to her desk and sank into her chair, her eyes fixed on the blank space before her. Her cruel words to Elijah replayed endlessly in her mind, like a slow-motion film with no end. For the first time, the woman who had ruled the business world with steely logic felt as though her chest was being crushed by despair. "You'll never see me any other way, will you?" Elijah's painful question had cut deep into her soul, forcing her to confront a truth she'd long denied. Claire had always prided herself on being fiercely independent, never letting emotions cloud her judgment. Now, as the defenses she'd spent a lifetime building lay stripped away, she realized she wasn't as strong as she thought. In truth, she had always been afraid of being hurt, of being exploited, and, above all, of losing the power and prestige she had devoted her life to achieving. In the days that followed, Claire withdrew completely. She avoided everyone, skipped critical meetings, and confined herself to her darkened office, refusing to face the world. Each night, as the city fell asleep, she lay awake, eyes empty, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd sacrificed in her life. Flashbacks of Elijah kept intruding on her thoughts, his gentle, proud gaze as he played chess, the tender way he cared for Mia, the desperation in his voice when he begged for help during her asthma attack. Claire realized that no one in her life had ever moved her as profoundly. She understood at last that her own prejudice and arrogance had destroyed a rare chance at happiness. She recalled her father Richard Hamilton's words from her childhood. A Hamilton must never show weakness, never let emotion overpower reason. And now she wondered if that cruel creed had turned her into the cold, ruthless, lonely person she'd become. One gray, rainy afternoon, Claire stood by her office window, watching the bustling streets below. Streams of people hurried past, each carrying untold stories she'd never noticed. She suddenly wondered how many opportunities she'd missed to understand and empathize with those around her. How many chances to be loved and truly be happy. Her gaze landed on the familiar street corner where she and Elijah had once talked after Mia's hospital scare. Her heart tightened as that memory surged back. Elijah's sincere, selfless look, free of calculation or self-interest. She recognized that no one had ever looked at her that way, and she realized she had destroyed the best thing that had ever happened to her with a single moment of weakness, selfishness, and deep-seated bias. Silently, Claire sat at her desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old photo of herself and her mother. Her gentle, loving mother had died when Claire was very young, leaving her to the care of her cold, demanding father who insisted on strength and success at all costs. Claire lightly touched her mother's face in the yellowed photograph, and tears began to fall uncontrollably. She wondered what her mother would say if she knew her daughter had become someone so accomplished, yet so cold and isolated. Someone who had hurt a good, sincere man like Elijah because of petty prejudices. For the first time in years, Claire allowed herself to cry. Those tears released all the pain, loneliness, and deep regret she had buried for so long. She cried not only for Elijah, but for herself, for the life she had lost by clinging to the wrong values. That night, Claire resolved to face herself honestly. She knew it was time to change, to discard the prejudices and arrogance that had governed her life. She would learn to forgive, to accept herself and others with all their flaws, pain, and true worth. Claire understood that the path ahead would be daunting. To make amends with Elijah, she would have to set aside her false pride and confront the biases of her family, her board, and society at large. But for the first time, she felt ready to risk everything for something far more valuable than anything she'd ever owned. A chance to be loved and to become a truly worthy human being. Her heart ached, yet felt lighter, for she knew that from this moment on, she would never live in deceit and loneliness again. Whatever the outcome, she would face it with courage, because now, Claire truly understood what mattered most in life. After days steeped in guilt and torment, Claire began to realize she couldn't keep hiding from the painful reality she'd caused herself. Though she'd tried every way to reach Elijah and apologize, all she ever got was absolute silence. Claire knew he had every right to refuse to see her, but in her heart she never lost hope for even the smallest chance to make things right. One cold, late afternoon, as Claire sat quietly by her office window watching the city shrouded in gray mist below, her phone suddenly vibrated with urgent calls. Her heart clenched when she saw the name on the screen, Elijah Brooks. She lifted the receiver with trembling hands. Elijah's voice came through, frantic and hoarse with desperation. "Claire, Mia's having a severe asthma attack again. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital and they say it's critical. I don't know what to do. I really have nowhere else to turn. Please, Claire, please help me this time. Save her." Elijah's choked plea stabbed Claire's heart with fresh pain. Her regret for hurting him cut sharper than ever. But immediately she knew there was no time for pride or reputation. Without a second's hesitation, Claire sprang up, threw on her coat and rushed down to the parking garage, ignoring the curious glances and whispers from the building staff. Less than 20 minutes later, Claire arrived at St. Mary's emergency entrance. She found Elijah slumped outside the treatment room, hands trembling as he buried his face in his arms, looking hollow with despair. He looked up at her arrival, eyes brimming with both gratitude and unspeakable anguish. "Claire, I'm sorry, but I honestly didn't know who else to call," he managed, voice shaking. "Maya's in critical condition. Doctors say she needs the best specialist and the most advanced treatment right away." Claire gently placed her hand on Elijah's shoulder, her voice resolute, warm, and fiercely determined. "You don't need to apologize, Elijah. I'm here to help you and Mia. Trust me, we will save her." Without another word, Claire strode into the ER, speaking directly with the medical team about Mia's condition. She leveraged every connection and ounce of influence she had, calling the hospital director and demanding the immediate assembly of the top pediatric respiratory experts. She personally guaranteed that she would cover all costs, whatever it took for Mia to receive the most cutting-edge therapy. The hospital buzzed with tense urgency. Every passing minute tore at Elijah's heart. He stood next to Claire, watching every small movement inside the treatment room, silently praying for his daughter's fragile life. After nearly 2 hours of intense intervention, the lead physician emerged, his expression grave, but carrying a glimmer of hope. "Mia is stable for now, but she remains very weak. We'll continue to monitor her closely. These next 24 hours are crucial. Thank you, Miss Hamilton. Your timely intervention truly saved her life." Elijah nearly collapsed with relief. Claire supported him, easing him into a waiting chair. In that moment, every barrier and misunderstanding between them seemed to dissolve. Elijah looked at Claire with eyes no longer filled with anger or disappointment, but with the deepest, most sincere gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, Claire," he whispered, voice quivering with emotion. Claire shook her head gently and offered him a sincere, tender smile, though her voice trembled with lingering remorse. "Elijah, I'm the one who needs to apologize. I let prejudice and pride blind me, and I hurt you and Mia. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I truly regret what I said before." Elijah was silent for a few seconds, his gaze searching Claire's eyes for the truest part of her. Finally, he spoke softly and empathetically. "I understand, Claire. Under that kind of pressure, anyone could make mistakes. What matters most is that you set everything aside to save Mia. To me, that means more than any apology." A warm wave washed over Claire. Relief mingled with joy so strong she felt tears threaten. In that instant, they both seemed to rediscover the trust, respect, and deep affection they had feared lost forever. That evening, Claire and Elijah sat by Mia's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully. The silence around them was no longer heavy with pain or guilt, but filled with calm and hope. Claire knew the road ahead to rebuild her relationship with Elijah and Mia wouldn't be easy, but now she was ready to face anything, to fight for the true happiness she had once let slip away. And in that moment, Claire understood, for the first time, that the real value of life doesn't lie in power or prestige, but in the capacity for genuine love and the courage to make amends for one's mistakes. A lesson she vowed never to lose again. After days lost in regret and turmoil, Claire finally realized she could no longer hide from the painful reality she'd caused. No matter how hard she tried to reach Elijah and apologize, all she got was complete silence. She knew he had every right to refuse her, but in her heart she still clung to the tiniest hope of making things right. One late, bitterly cold afternoon, Claire sat by her office window, staring at the gray, misty city below, when her phone suddenly buzzed urgently. Her heart clenched at the name on the screen. Elijah Brooks. She answered with trembling hands. His voice came through hoarse and panicked. "Claire? Mia's having a very severe asthma attack again. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. They say it's critical. I don't know what to do. Please, Claire, help me this time. Save her." His choked plea drove a knife into Claire's heart. All her remorse for the pain she'd caused him sharpened at once. But she knew there was no time for pride. Without hesitation, she grabbed her coat and raced down to the parking garage, ignoring the curious and judgmental glances of her colleagues. Less than 20 minutes later, Claire burst into the emergency department at St. Mary's. Elijah sat outside the treatment room, hands shaking as he clutched his head, his face drawn and desperate. When he saw Claire, gratitude and fresh anguish flickered in his eyes. "Claire, I'm sorry, but I didn't know who else to call," he choked out. "Mia's condition is critical. The doctors say she needs the best specialist and the most advanced treatment immediately." Claire gently laid her hand on his shoulder. Her voice was calm yet resolute. "You don't need to apologize, Elijah. I'm here to help both of you. Trust me. We will save her." She strode into the treatment room and spoke directly with the doctors about Mia's condition. Using all her influence, she called the hospital director and demanded that the top pediatric respiratory experts be assembled at once. She pledged to cover every expense and handle all the paperwork herself so Mia could receive the most advanced care. The emergency department buzzed with urgency. Every passing second tightened Elijah's chest with fear as he stood beside Claire, eyes fixed on the treatment room door, silently praying for Mia's life. After nearly 2 hours of tense work, the lead physician emerged, eyes grave but hopeful. "Ms. Hamilton, Mia's condition is now stable, though she remains very weak. We'll continue close monitoring. The next 24 hours will be critical. Thank you. Your timely intervention truly saved her life." Elijah nearly collapsed with relief. Claire gently guided him to a chair. In that moment, every barrier and misunderstanding between them seemed to melt away. Elijah looked at Claire not with anger or disappointment, but with the deepest gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, Claire," he whispered, voice trembling. Claire shook her head, tears welling in her eyes but her voice steady. "Elijah, I'm the one who should apologize. My prejudice and arrogance blinded me and hurt you and Mia. I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness, but please know I genuinely regret what I said." Elijah was silent for a moment, then met Claire's eyes, searching for her sincerity. Finally he spoke, his tone soft and understanding. "I understand, Claire. Under that pressure, anyone could make mistakes. What matters most is that you set everything aside to save Mia. For me, that means far more than any apology." Warmth flooded Claire's heart, relief and joy mingling until tears slipped down her cheeks. In that moment, they both rediscovered the trust, respect, and deep affection they'd feared lost. That evening, Claire and Elijah sat side by side at Mia's bedside, watching her sleep peacefully. The silence enveloping them was no longer one of guilt or pain, but of peace and hope. Claire knew that rebuilding her relationship with Elijah and Mia wouldn't be easy, but now she was ready to face whatever lay ahead, to fight for the happiness she had once let slip away. And in that moment she understood that true value in life doesn't come from power or prestige, but from the capacity to love sincerely and the courage to repair one's mistakes. The peaceful days I spent with Elijah and Mia taught me that true love isn't just the harmony of two hearts. It's also a responsibility to fight the harsh biases of society and even my own family. I know perfectly well that to protect this love, I must face the greatest challenges I've ever known. That morning, pale sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Hamilton boardroom. A heavy silence filled the expansive space as the senior directors sat motionless, their cold eyes fixed on me. At the head of the table sat my father, Richard Hamilton, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. I stood tall, my gaze unwavering, and spoke clearly and firmly. I want you all to understand that my relationship with Elijah Brooks is not for any of you to judge or interfere with. Opposing it, simply because he is a black man and a humble worker, is nothing less than racism and class prejudice. And it is utterly intolerable at Hamilton Corporation. My words sent a shockwave through the room. A few directors sprang to their feet, voices rising in outrage. "Ms. Hamilton, do you realize how severely you're damaging our company's reputation? A romantic involvement with an ordinary laborer, let alone a black man, undermines everything our family and this company have built over the years." My father cut them off coldly. "Claire, if you continue down this path, you will no longer be considered part of the Hamilton family. Do you understand that?" I met his glare without flinching, my heart aching, but my resolve unbroken. "Father, I fully understand the consequences of this decision, but I refuse to abandon the man I love because of your and the board's misguided prejudices. Elijah Brooks is a kind, genuine man deserving of respect. He is no less worthy than anyone in this room." My declaration stunned the board into silence, especially my father. Without another word, he signaled the end of the meeting. I walked out of that room with a heavy heart, yet I had never felt more resolute. In the days that followed, the media and public opinion unleashed a furious assault on Elijah and me. Sensational headlines accused me of sullying a prestigious corporation with an inappropriate relationship. Jason Miller, the same low-level employee who had sparked the earlier scandal, seized the moment to spread further slander aimed at discrediting Elijah. Meanwhile, a small faction within the company launched a covert campaign against me, sending vile emails and messages mocking Elijah and me with racist and classist vitriol. I felt more exhausted and wounded than ever, but deep down, I knew I could not back down. One evening, I sat beside Elijah in his modest apartment, took his hand, and spoke from the heart. "Elijah, all my life I thought I was strong and unbreakable, but it wasn't until I met you and Mia that I learned what real strength is. It's the ability to stand firm in the face of the cruelest challenges for the sake of those you love." He looked at me, affection and worry mingling in his eyes. "Claire, I don't want you to lose everything you've built for my sake. Our love might cost you your family, your career, your reputation." I smiled gently and shook my head. "I don't care about any of that anymore, Elijah. All I want now is to fight for this love and show everyone how wrong prejudice and discrimination are." With that unwavering determination, I arranged a public press conference at the city's largest convention center, inviting every news outlet and even my harshest critics. As CEO of Hamilton Corporation, I stood before them and declared that I would never abandon Elijah, and I denounced racism and classism in the strongest terms. I want everyone to understand that love and human worth can never be measured by skin color, social status, or money. Elijah Brooks is not inferior. He is a brave, sincere man who deserves our respect. If anyone still judges him with narrow-minded prejudice, it is they who should be condemned. My speech sent shockwaves through both society and the media. The board and my family reacted with unprecedented fury, even discussing whether to strip me of my CEO role. But I stood firm, ready to risk everything to protect my true love. Across town, Elijah watched every word on live television. For the first time, he saw the real power of the woman he loved, a power that transcended rank or wealth, rooted instead in courage, sincerity, and an unconditionally loving heart. In that moment, Elijah knew he was no longer alone in the fight against prejudice. He and I now stood side by side on the same front line, determined to defend our genuine love and ready to face whatever challenges fate would throw at us next. The media storm ignited by Claire's public press conference showed no sign of abating. In the days that followed, pressure from the press, the board of directors, and most of all from her own father, grew increasingly intense. Claire knew that, if she was to protect the love and the peace she had found with Elijah and Mia, she could not remain torn between two worlds, one of honest, a simple love, and the other of power, prestige, and crushing responsibility. One early morning, Claire sat in her expansive, luxurious CEO office, the very place she had poured her life into building a financial empire. But now her eyes held none of their former pride or excitement. Instead, they were shadowed by deep reflection. She quietly laid the resignation letter she had just signed on her desk and gazed out at the bustling city below. Claire understood how much this decision would rock the Hamilton family and corporation. But she also knew it was the only way to live truly as herself. Just then, the door opened unexpectedly. Richard Hamilton entered, his face the same cold, stern mask she'd known all her life. His eyes were heavy with disappointment, and something close to hurt. "So you really mean to do this, Claire?" he asked, voice low but brimming with restrained anger. "You're willing to give up everything your family and I built for you, just for some ordinary laborer?" Claire drew a steady breath, her voice clear and unwavering. "Father, I know this choice pains you, but please understand that what I'm giving up is merely power and money. What I'm gaining is true love, something I've never known until now. Elijah and Mia have shown me a life of real meaning." Richard shook his head, his eyes icy. "I'm truly disappointed in you, Claire. You're betraying your own family." "No, Father," Claire replied, meeting his gaze with equal resolve and sorrow. "I am betraying no one. I'm simply living honestly. I could never be happy continuing to live a lie dictated by prejudice and expectation." Richard fell silent for a long moment, then turned and walked out without another word, leaving Claire alone. Pain stabbed her heart, but beneath it lay a profound relief. For the first time in her life, she had stood up to everyone to defend the values she truly believed in. That afternoon, Claire quietly left the office with a lightness she had never before felt. She knew that from this moment on, her life would no longer be defined by luxurious isolation, but by the simple, loving happiness she would share with Elijah and Mia. When she arrived at their modest apartment, Elijah was preparing dinner, and Mia was happily drawing at the small table. He looked up in surprise to see her home so early, concern and relief shining in his eyes. "Claire, are you okay? I know you had to face the board today." Claire offered him a gentle smile and wrapped him in a tight hug, her voice soft but earnest. "I'm fine, Elijah. I've never felt so at peace or so happy. I just resigned as CEO. From now on, I'm no longer the powerful Claire Hamilton everyone knows. I'm simply Claire, the woman who loves you and Mia, who wants to spend her life protecting and caring for our little family." Elijah froze, his hand trembling as he lifted her chin to look into her eyes, his voice thick with emotion. "Claire, you don't have to do this for me. You've spent your life building this career." "No, Elijah," Claire interrupted gently but firmly. "I'm doing this for me. I've realized that the most precious things in life aren't power or status, but love, sincerity, and the courage to live by one's beliefs. You and Mia are the most precious things in my world." Elijah was silent for a long heartbeat, tears glistening in his eyes. Never before had he felt so loved and cherished. Claire, a woman who once ruled with pride and power, was now willing to give it all up for the simple love they shared. He held her tightly and whispered, his voice full of awe, "I don't know what to say, Claire. You are the bravest, most wonderful woman I've ever known. From this moment on, we'll face everything together and build a new life based on love and mutual respect." Just then, Mia came running over, her little arms wrapping around them both, her eyes shining with joy. "Miss Claire, you're going to stay with Daddy and me forever, right?" Claire smiled, tears of happiness slipping down her cheeks. "Yes, Mia. I will always be here for you and Daddy Elijah." That evening, under the gentle glow of their small home, the three of them shared a simple but warm dinner. Claire knew the road ahead would not be strewn with roses, but she was ready to face every challenge with Elijah and Mia by her side. In her heart burned an unshakable truth. Surrendering everything to protect true love was the most important choice she had ever made. And with that conviction, Claire embarked on a new journey. A journey toward the real, simple, and profoundly meaningful happiness. The wedding of Claire and Elijah took place on a warm, sunlit spring morning in the charming garden of the little house they'd just bought on the city's outskirts. It wasn't a lavish, high-society affair, but a simple, heartfelt celebration attended only by those who truly cared about and loved them. Inside, Claire stood quietly before a mirror, admiring herself in a simple yet elegant wedding dress. Gone was the powerful, cutting-edge businesswoman. In her place stood a woman unburdened, radiant with relief and joy, as if she had finally set down the weight she'd carried for so many years. Outside, Mia flitted back and forth, her face alight with excitement as she carried small flower petals to toss into the air when her father and Claire exchanged their vows. In her eyes shone pure delight and pride. Pride that, at long last, she had a complete family, wrapped every day in love and care. At the end of a narrow aisle, Elijah waited for Claire, his heart pounding with emotion. As she approached, her gaze warm and sincere, he felt as if his heart might burst with happiness, a happiness he'd once believed he'd never know again. When they stood face to face, eyes locked in love and trust, they needed no words to express the depth of their feelings. Both understood the storms and trials they'd weathered to arrive at this moment. Prejudice, family opposition, societal pressure, and public scrutiny all had failed to extinguish the genuine love they shared. "Claire," Elijah said softly, his voice trembling with emotion, "I thought my heart died when Lisa passed away, but you gave me a second chance at love, at trust, at living a life filled with real meaning. I promise to love you forever, to protect you, and to build a truly happy family with you." Claire beamed, tears of joy tracing her cheeks as she replied, "Elijah, I lived in a world of power but complete loneliness. Only when I met you and Mia did I discover life's true meaning, that happiness isn't found in status or possessions, but in genuine love, in courage, and in the sacrifices we make for those we cherish. I promise to stand by you always, to care for Mia as my own daughter, and to protect our little family with everything I have." As they spoke those vows, Mia gleefully tossed her petals into the blue sky, her laughter lifting the hearts of everyone present. In that instant, every prejudice, every difference of skin color or social standing vanished, leaving only the pure love, bravery, and profound sacrifice of two people who had overcome the harshest barriers to protect their family. In the years that followed, their little family lived in peace and happiness. Elijah started free chess classes for underprivileged children in their neighborhood, while Claire found new joy in volunteering and community service. Mia grew up strong, bright, and compassionate under the unconditional love of her parents. Their story of love conquering all prejudice became a powerful inspiration, celebrated and admired by many. It proved that a person's true worth is never measured by skin color, background, or wealth, but by genuine love, sacrifice, and the courage to stand against societal wrongs. Claire and Elijah understood they were building more than just a happy family. They were sending a profound message to their community and future generations. True love deserves every defense, and the walls of racism and classism must be torn down in pursuit of unity and understanding. Years later, on a sun-drenched summer afternoon, Claire and Elijah sat together on their front porch, quietly watching Mia play with her friends in the yard. Gently taking her hand, Elijah spoke in a soft, heartfelt tone. "Claire, do you know the most wonderful thing we've ever done?" Claire smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "The most wonderful thing we've done is to bravely break down every prejudice so we could live our truth. And even more wonderful is that we've passed that lesson on to Mia and everyone around us." Elijah nodded, pressing a tender kiss to Claire's hair, his eyes filled with contentment. "Exactly. Only when people learn to love genuinely, to respect and accept each other's differences, can they truly find happiness and the real meaning of life." And under that warm afternoon sun, Claire and Elijah sat together, savoring the simplest yet most complete happiness they'd ever found. Happiness built on genuine love, courage, and the resolve to overcome every barrier of prejudice and discrimination. That, they believed, was the greatest message their lives could offer to anyone seeking true joy in this world. What about you? If you were Claire, would you be willing to give up everything for your one true love? Share your thoughts below in the comments. Don't forget to like, share this video with your loved ones, and subscribe for more inspiring, meaningful stories. Thank you for being with us.